hard against any future return of bloated and biased bureaucracy. I look forward to working with you towards these ends. I now recognize the Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me also offer a good morning to our witnesses. Let me also join you, Mr. Chairman, and begin by thanking literally the tens of thousands of men and women across America's intelligence community who work every day to keep our country safe. Their work is by necessity secret. That is the nature of intelligence. But that is also why hearings like this one matter so much. Over the past year, we have seen a series of developments that raise serious concerns about the erosion of safeguards that protect both our democracy and our security. And nowhere is that more worrying than when it comes to the integrity of our elections. For decades now, our intelligence community has warned that foreign adversaries, including Russia, China, and Iran, are actively seeking to shape the outcome of American elections. These efforts have included cyber intrusions, disinformation campaigns, and covert influence operations designed to divide Americans and undermine our confidence in our democratic institutions. Protecting our elections from these threats should be one of the intelligence community's highest priorities. The DNI is supposed to be coordinating intelligence on foreign election interference, warning the American people about adversaries seeking to undermine our democracy, ensuring that federal, state, and local officials have the information they need. Congress even required the creation of a foreign malign influence center inside the office of the DNI to coordinate the intelligence community's response to foreign election interference and ensure that these threats are properly shared across the government. That is the mission Congress assigned to the DNI. But while foreign adversaries are actively probing our democratic institutions, the DNI has eliminated the Foreign Malign Influence Center and does not have a designated official coordinating the response to election threats. And for months, the committee has repeatedly requested briefings from the IC, briefings that are required by law on legitimate foreign threats to the midterms. We have received no response. Now, that silence, I believe, should concern every member of the committee because it clearly demonstrates the DNI is not interested in protecting American democracy by combating foreign influence. Instead, unfortunately, we have seen the DNI involve herself in purely domestic matters. Last month, we saw Director Gabbard personally participate in a law enforcement raid to seize election ballots and voting machine records in Fulton County, Georgia. A raid tied to an election that the president lost 6 years ago. When the warrant supporting the raid was unsealed, it showed something deeply troubling. There was no foreign connection to justify the involvement of our nation's top spy. Instead, the predicate for the warrant was a slop of debunked conspiracy theories that had already been rejected repeatedly by courts, by independent investigators, and even by Georgia's own Republican Secretary of State. Yet the nation's top intelligence official was personally involved in this operation. This raises one very serious question. If the intelligence community is not being deployed to mobilize against foreign threats, why is it being deployed at all on a domestic issue? The DNI's appearance at this raid, as well as their involvement in seizing voting machines from Puerto Rico, suggests something that should also alarm every American. I believe an organized effort to misuse her national security powers to interfere in domestic politics and potentially provide a pretext for the president's unconstitutional efforts to seize control of the upcoming elections. Now, don't take my word for it. The president has repeatedly pushed for the nationalization of our elections, calling for federal government to override the state election laws and, quote, take over voting while continuing to make false statements about election fraud. And we have heard troubling rhetoric from senior officials that reinforce these concerns. As former Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said publicly, we've been, and this is a quote, we've been proactive trying to make sure we have the right people voting, electing the right leaders to lead this country. At the same time, the administration has brought into government individuals promoting conspiracy theories about our elections. The so-called White House Director of Election Security and Integrity, Kurt Olson, played a key role in efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Now Mr. Olson holds a position inside the federal government with the authority to refer criminal investigations and access our most sensitive security information, all supposedly doing his witch hunts around elections. As a matter of fact, according to the court filings, he helped trigger the FBI seizure of the ballots in Fulton County. So it's worth asking, why is someone whose career has been devoted to undermining the legitimate results of a democratic election now operating from inside the federal government with access to law enforcement and intelligence authorities? What exactly has he been empowered to do? As members of our committee know, this committee was created in the aftermath of the unconstitutional abuses exposed after Watergate. The guardrails have been built around our intelligence and law enforcement agencies over the past several decades exist for a reason. Without them, America begins to look more like adversaries emphasized in this year's annual threat assessment: China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and less like a democracy. Confronting these very clear and present threats to American security requires experienced professionals in intelligence agencies that are focused squarely on their mission. Instead, over the past year, we've seen actions that only serve to weaken them. Politically motivated purges at the FBI has resulted in the exodus of hundreds of agents and the reassignments of hundreds more from key national security areas like counterintelligence, counterterrorism, and cyber, and where they've been redeployed to? Immigration enforcement. In one troubling case, agents working on a task force focused on threats from Iran, clearly something that's pretty damn important right now, were dismissed because they had previously participated in the investigation of the president's mishandling of classified information. Elsewhere, the Bureau's budget is being slashed. Last year, it cut over $500 million, with the largest decreases from cyber, counterterrorism, and counterespionage. And the remaining scarce resources are being squandered on things like a $60 million jet for the director's personal travel so he can go golfing in Scotland or partying with athletes in Milan. In fact, according to a whistleblower account, those flights became so frequent they even delayed the Bureau's response to major incidents like the Charlie Kirk assassination or the shooting at Brown University. Credible reports also indicate that highly trained FBI agents from elite SWAT units have been reassigned to chauffeur his girlfriend, an unprecedented use of personnel whose training are actually intended for hunting violent criminals and neutralizing terrorists. Unfortunately, this dysfunction has not been limited to the FBI. Both the National Security Agency and the Defense Intelligence Agency, and this is no reflection on the two gentlemen sitting in front of us, were both left leaderless for months after the president fired their directors, one at the behest of a 9/11 conspiracy theorist, and the other for providing a fact-based assessment that contradicted the president's claims about obliterating Iran's nuclear program. Clearly, if the program had been truly obliterated, the president wouldn't be bombing again right now. And again, more than 1/3 of the personnel at CISA, created by Congress to protect critical infrastructure like power, water, and election systems have been forced out. That seems like a real mistake as we still grapple with the intrusion called Typhoon and the recent Iranian cyber attack on Stryker. And we are now seeing in real time the cost to the State Department. Thousands of American citizens were trapped in a literal war zone with little assistance from their own government. For a time, those calling the State Department hotline for assistance were greeted with a pre-recorded message that said, quote, please do not rely on the U.S. government for assisted departure or evacuation. This was a foreseeable security crisis. When you start a war of choice, when there was no imminent threat, you should be able to prepare to make sure you get Americans out of the war zone. That same attitude, pushing some of our closest friends into the arms of our most capable foes, has profound consequences. Two of our most significant allies, Canada and the UK, are currently working to sign trade deals with China because they no longer believe the United States is a dependable partner. That's a remarkable statement in 2026. And in the president's war of choice with Iran, a war that has already killed 13 service members, cost Americans, taxpayers, billions of dollars, and scrambled supply chains from oil to fertilizer to aluminum, nobody answered the call when the president asked our allies to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. As the president's own counterterrorism chief acknowledged in his resignation yesterday, Iran posed no imminent threat to the United States. Unfortunately, our allies have been alienated and distracted by the administration's unilateral threats like invading Greenland, and the result is clear. Americans have been left more exposed in an already dangerous conflict. Now, what I just outlined is quite a list, and it's a partial one at that. Matter of fact, we've got a full list we'd like to share with all the press. So what does this all mean? It matters because I believe the warnings contained in this year's annual threat assessment. I believe our IC when they say the global security environment is becoming more complex and that armed conflict is becoming more global. And I also agree with the assessment when it says that to succeed, we must think prudently and prioritize our efforts. On the topic of the annual threat assessment, I want to close where I began by noting that since the first time since 2017, in the aftermath of Russia's intervention in our 2016 elections, the annual threat assessment includes nothing about adversary attempts to influence American elections. Now, I don't believe this omission means that the threat has disappeared. It means that the intelligence community is no longer being allowed to speak honestly about it. And it raises serious questions, and I will be asking about your priorities, Director Gabbard, in terms of what you're choosing to prioritize instead. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Before we go to the witnesses, now that we have a critical mass of members, I would simply like to remind members that we will handle questions as we did last year, seniority at the time of the gavel, and alternating between Democrats and Republicans. We'll have one round of questions, 7 minutes per round. I will not entertain questions after 7 minutes.